Hello, dear ones. This is Dr. Hazel-Grace, and I am super stoked to be joined with Kamela Love. And today we're going to be talking about causation of harm. True story. Camila's going to be leading us in this because I am just super down for this conversation. Don't fully know where it's going to go, but that lights me up. And if you don't know who I am the creator of the Art of Repair, which is a six-step methodology to navigate ruptures, harm, misunderstandings, hurt, and a map to guide us back into sweet connection. So, Camila, welcome. And who are you?
Thank you, Dr. Hazel Grace. I am, like Hazel Grace, a nerd in the world of conflict resolution and repair in relationships. My background includes doing mediation and restorative justice work in groups and jails, in communities of marginalized people, in marriages and divorces, in parent-child relationships, really anything that's like a deep, meaningful relationship. And pain has been felt. I come in to support with that. I also do different spiritual healing work and trauma healing work and nervous system reset, nervous system regulation. All of it really goes together. So here we
That's
are.
it?
And
That's
that's
all
it.
you do? That's it?
I mean, I'm leaving out the other 3 dozen things I do, but we'll just stay on this sphere of my life.
Uh-huh. Great.
So I've had this nagging, honestly, like a rub inside myself for years as I work through mediation work and conflict resolution work. And I experience that there's different opinions in the world about the causation of harm. And I told Dr. Hazel Grace, I want to nerd out with you on this. I want to see how your brain and heart process this stuff and how you think about it. And ultimately, they were like, great, let's record it and go live. So here we are. So here's the crux. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I feel like probably the common, we can call it default or collective way of looking at this is this concept of, you caused me harm or I caused you harm. And
Hmm.
there's this causation element that is the person who, let's just call them the harm doer. We can use different vocabulary, but let's say there's the harm doer and the person who experiences harm. So, what I notice most often is the harm doer is the creator of the harm. And the person experiencing the harm is impacted by it. They're sort of the recipient of the harm, and more often than not, I see the person who feels harm saying, you hurt me. And there's, even if we remove the blame, there's a causation element. So we're not going to go with blame. We're going to talk about causation. So what I'm interested in nerding out about is where harm initiates, where harm emerges, where harm is experienced. And to lay the ground a little bit more, why it's caused me questions and confusion is when we bring in a more, some could call it a spiritual lens, or if we don't want to go into the spiritual realm, we can just call it self responsibility in a deep way, like soul responsible. So I'll go ahead and bring in, some of my mystical Sufi based belief system set, and many spirit, really all Gnostic mystic spiritualities come down to this same point, and maybe other faiths too, which is the concept of I am in a hall of mirrors. You are in a hall of mirrors. You are experiencing life in such a way that you're going to manifest exactly the things you need to trigger you in the right ways for you to have the opportunity to heal your own patterns of core wounding, etc., and even ancestral. And for me, I'm in a hall of mirrors and I am actually the creator of my life. And the things that are emerging in relationships are reflections from others. So it seems like it's someone else. It seems like it's Dr. Hazel Grace, but it's really just me putting something into the mirror of Dr. Hazel Grace that I need to see for my own growth and healing. Follow me so far?
Mhm. Totally.
So, with this sort of more soul mirror lens, I don't think you can cause me harm. I think I can interpret actions that you make, words that you say, omissions, things that you don't do and things that you don't say. I can
Right.
experience that as painful, as harmful. I can interpret that as painful and harmful. But for me, it's not actually you causing me harm. It's me causing myself the experience of an opportunity for healing, which right now feels like pain or feels like harm through your actions, through your words, or through your omissions. So
Hmm.
it's like a highly self responsible way of seeing harm. This doesn't take away that I also think I am responsible for the harm I leave an impact. Like if I impact you in a harmful way, I do feel absolutely responsible to tend to that and to clean that up. And that's the work we do, the art of repair that you birthed so beautifully. So it's not about sort of exculpating myself from, well, not my fault, not my problem. You're hurting.
What
Go
was that
figure it.
word?
Exculpate, sort of like
Oh, exculpate. I love new words. What is that word?
if I'm using it right, it's getting out of the blame. It's like sort of coming out of the punishment or
Okay.
out of the consequences. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
removing
Okay,
myself
got it.
from
Being
consequence,
accountable.
dodging responsibility, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not
No.
trying to dodge responsibility,
Right.
but I actually think our work is best when we can eventually get people to the place of, the person who's feeling the harm. We could say maybe they're in a victim role at some stage of the process. Often they're experiencing being a victim before we emerge out of the victim role. And so it's like from that place, as they emerge and as they heal, part of, to me, the true healing in repairing harm in relationships is when I, as the harmed person, can take full responsibility for how I helped co-create that. I mean, this is straight out of the drama triangle. How we get out of the victim role is taking responsibility for the way we co-created that situation, right? There's so
Yeah.
much here. I'm going to just pause and see where you want to take it.
Okay, there was like 40 different thoughts that were coming at the same time. And the thing I kept hearing is yes and, yes
Yeah.
and, yes and, yes and. And it's so multifaceted and layered and all these different angles of the prism. I'm just like, what? That's my impact in hearing all that. Um, I have a fun framing that mirrors your framing around your like your spiritual orientation around you being the center of the mirrors. And it was presented to me by way of this imaginary game. So the game is, Kamela, here's the game. The game is every single person on the planet has got it all, like they're all in like enlightened and they've got it all figured out and they are just like one, they are just basically light beings. And you're the only one who doesn't get it yet. And everyone is conspiring pronoia for your good, for you to also get it in your lifetime, for you to also be enlightened in your lifetime. And some characters are going to show up in this like loving, nurturing, caretaking way, and then some are going to show up in a way that one might say they're causing you harm, or you might experience harm is being done to me, but it is all in service and to support your evolutionary journey for you also to experience enlightenment. So
Yes.
that's the fun framing that I got that feels similar to what you were saying.
Yeah, and I think that's real. I don't think that's a game. I think that's what we're doing. I mean, it's a game. We're playing a game. I think that's the game we're playing
Yeah, yeah,
at large, humanity.
yeah, yeah. And I think like 95% of me agrees.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's some part I'm like, and but like when I'm thinking of it from like that level, that like level up there, I it's easier for me to get on board. Here, my hand. And then when I'm in my earth plane, sometimes it's hard for me to get on board with that. And especially when I think about children.
Mm,
Like
yeah,
I,
right.
I can hold the perspective of like this being, this conscious being that chose to come into Earthside, had their stars aligned to choose their parents, to choose the struggles that they were going to experience to get what they came here to get. And so like there's a way I can see that they like chose that on a spiritual plane, but on another plane, when I see an adult hitting a child or yelling at a child or shaming a child, I'm like, that parent is causing pain to that child.
Yeah.
So I can't help. I want to be able to hold both
Yeah.
as valid and true, at least from my perspective. So that's my first pass thoughts.
Yeah. I want to riff on that last piece. I actually see the frame of what I said earlier more in the context of sort of mature adults, whatever we want to call that, right? Um, and I feel like I could make a whole separate video on that idea of like, right, a parent harming a child or torture, or abuse, or, all the things that are happening in
Yeah.
this world. And I do go more to sort of the metaphysical, like soul contracts that we come in with and the balance of karma at large across lifetimes, right? And like, we can kind of leave that aside for this video and we can take that today's discussion is a little more about kind of like consenting mature adults.
Okay, that's good framing.
Yeah.
Um, okay. And I know that there's like physical harm and then there's like emotional, psychological harm. And
Right.
those are also kind of two different categories, but I am I'm brimming with desire to share this story with you as you were talking. Okay, so it's so funny. Okay, this actually happened in Denver, Colorado, probably 10 years ago at Ecstatic Dance. Ava, who's been holding it down for 20 years, an epic, amazing ecstatic dance. Thank you, Ava, one of my great mentors and teachers. And I'm at the back of the room dancing, and I am laying down. I'm not dancing, I'm laying down and I'm stretching, and I'm in the zone where you're allowed to lay down, right? So I'm not like in the middle of the dance floor. And I am just zoned out and my eyes are closed, and then wham! And I'm like, my nose is there was like a little bit of blood in my nose. Someone was doing a poi thingy, stick thingy, and it just hit me in the face. And like I was like, basically he was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "It's no talking." So I was like, "I got it, I got it, I got it." So at the end of the night, it's okay. It's so hard to say because it's so funny. He comes up to me and he was like, "Hey," and he was checking in on me. He's like, "Hey, I don't know what's happening in your world that had the poi hit your face." And I just stopped him right there and I was like, no. I was like, here's what happened. Uh oh, and he also said, I've never done that before. Or that's never happened. I'm like, well, you can't actually say that now because it did happen on my face and you were holding it and it hit my face. So I'm holding you responsible that you dropped it on my face. And he was just like, just totally shocked that I just basically like burst his little spiritual bypassy bubble, that he caused me pain. Like he was irresponsible with that poi and dropped it on my face. So like I'm so the thing that I'm curious about is like, if I punch 100 people, I can imagine 100 people saying I caused pain, hurt to
Mhm.
100 people in a row, and
Mhm.
maybe physical things is maybe different than
Mhm.
emotional, but that's the story that came through when you shared that.
It's a great story. It's totally on point, on poi.
On
Um, and for the sake of this discussion, I do think it'll be more fruitful if we go with the psychological emotional harm among mature adults. But what he said is the concept I'm wanting to tease out if it were
Yeah,
not a physical thing.
right.
And I mean, we could say of the 100 people you punch, maybe two, three, 12 of them will experience it as pleasurable or kinky or fun or exciting or
Oh,
adventurous. So it is actually possible to do the same analysis with physical things.
oh, that is really
In
interesting.
fact, I could even, yeah, we
Well,
can include
good.
physical. Yeah. Because I've had relational things where, I did something physical that they experienced as relationship ending, and
Yeah,
someone did something that I would consider more harmful physical to me that was, a beautiful experience for us.
yeah,
And it wasn't
yeah,
relationship ending. So honestly, we can go to
yeah.
physical Yeah.
I think how this conversation is going. Well, f first of all, I'm having fun and I think it's interesting. I'm and maybe other people do. I actually don't care because I'm having so much fun. But
Okay.
I think how the conversation is going is you set up some context or premise for us to have the dialogue, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm on board. Yeah, but what about this?" And then you had a really great response. I'm like, "What about this?" And then you had a great response. So then my next, but what about this?
Yeah.
Uh,
What you got?
you down? Is this good or is this
I'm
down?
ready. Let's
Okay,
go.
okay. Um, it's something like okay. No, that's not it. But it's something like if the person is intending to hurt
Mhm.
and they know something about you, like for example, I had an ex metamor. She later told me, she said, I knew the thing that would have you get scared and upset and jealous and mad is if I told you that the partner that we're both dating is we talked about having babies together. And I
Mm, mhm,
intentionally said that when they kind of actually weren't.
mm,
It was
mhm,
kind of a white lie thing, but
mhm,
with the thing, so it's like
mm.
does it make a difference if the person is like intentionally wanting to cause harm?
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
the there's the there's the person that is doing the thing, and then there's the person receiving the thing. But I think where we're one of the things that we're kind of looking at is the receiver is really at choice.
Right.
Is really there's a way that the receiver can always be at choice of how they want to interpret it.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yes. And I love it because we are kind of carved. You're like, well, what about this? I'm like, yeah, that sort of is a carve out. I'm not quite talking about that. So this is another good one. I'm not talking about when there's intent to cause harm. I'm really talking about when, unintentional harm is caused, which is definitely the bulk of my world and my work, and probably yours too, which is
yeah.
not to say there aren't the nefarious harm doers all over the place, but they don't tend to be the people I'm working with. It tends to be where we are unintentionally causing someone we love harm.
Hmm.
And, I'm going to go back to the guy swinging poi at ecstatic dance. For me, there's a really important part that I'll call sequencing, right? So if we're just going to make up a scenario where you have done something that I'm experiencing as painful, as harmful. If right out the gate, you're like, okay, Kamela, well, what did you do to co create that? Like, what did you do to help cause that? I'm going to be like, yo, you know, which is what the guy did. He's like, I don't know what in your world had you cause this poi to fall on your face. And you're like, bro, I'm in pain, right?
Yeah.
So for me, there's a sequencing. It's like, and this is
Yeah.
also the structure of REPAIR in the art of repair. It's like we don't go to the end at the beginning. We start with empathy, we start with
Yeah.
resourcing, we start with care, we start with listening.
Yeah.
So the piece I'm talking about really is mature consenting adults. It tends to be more emotional and psychological than physical. It tends to be when harm is not intended to be caused, and it tends
Right.
to be in the space of loving relationships. And if you're really able to hold presence for me and help me share my experience and we listen to each other, eventually I can hear your experience, right?
Uh-huh.
But you better
Yeah.
listen to my experience first if we want to get there, generally speaking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
so, towards the end of that process of listening and understanding and acknowledging, that's the sweet spot I'm talking about when there's this opportunity. You called it choice. It's like when the person who experienced harm eventually gets to the place in their evolution of healing that conflict where
Hmm.
they realize, and these are the deeper soul teachings of
Right.
how, and these teachings are everywhere. My tapping mentor Sonia Sophia says, our triggers are our treasures. And it's
Hmm.
like anytime I'm triggered, I know you're showing me a part of me that I'm not fully in loving connection with. So this
Yes.
is how I walk my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
why it's caused me rubs is because I get into the place where someone's mad at me for causing them harm, and they're like, you caused me harm, you caused me harm, you caused me harm, and I'm like, but actually you have a choice in the matter. But I can't
Yeah.
say that to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
until we're at the point of the process where they actually are interested in and ready to take responsibility at that level. And honestly, most or a lot of people never get there.
Yeah, this reminds me, oh my gosh, there's so many. This is like a hundred things are shooting out of my brain and soul in this conversation. So, one of the things that I'm trained in is integral circling.
Mhm.
And one of the practices is when we bring something that's more in like the yang category, that's a little bit more like, I want to show you a mirror of what I'm seeing,
Mhm.
or a little bit like, do you know you're doing this thing? Or like, I'm not sure that I totally believe you. Some sort of like more pokey at the person. And then there's another kind of way, which is yin, which is creating rapport, understanding. And so one of the things that I learned from my training is don't bring the yin or don't bring the yang until
Yeah,
there's enough yin,
that's
which
good.
is what I'm hearing you say, which is like
Yeah.
if you do want to get to the point with someone to say something like with curiosity and care, hey, I'm curious, what do you imagine your role might have been in co-creating this? Or I'm curious about yeah, and it actually reminds me of a very real personal experience I had, I think is a perfect example. Um I've had someone that they were expressing how they felt like I wasn't being generous enough and I wasn't being considerate enough. And like I was somehow taking advantage of them. And I was so willing to hear and listen to them and listen to them and really get their world at the same time of knowing that this is their pattern and this is what they say about everyone around them. And it's like, I hear you, and who's the common denominator? I hear you, and what might be happening in your world such that you keep magnetizing people where you have this said experience over and over and over and over,
Yeah.
where uh, that's not everyone's not walking around saying that about everyone, but that tends to be the pattern that you're experiencing. So that I feel like is maybe more of an example of where you were thinking about.
That's exactly it. So it's like the stage of development where I am now, I think harm experienced is highly subjective.
Oh,
It
well,
is so based in, our past experiences of trauma and what's healed and what's not, just to boil it down to the basics. And so, if, part of the world that I work in is supporting accountability processes in sacred sexuality contexts and in tantric environments. So one of the things I see often in the scenarios, picture a sex positive environment where there's a person who experienced interaction. Usually there's a power dynamic, like a teacher and student kind of dynamic. And the student, the down power person, experiences some level of harm. And what I'm very clear about is, if we put 20 different people in that role and the exact same thing happens, some of them will experience as harm, some won't. Some of them will experience a very high level of harm, someone will experience a very low level of harm. And, I have many of these cases in my work life that we're like unpacking. And when we're the person experiencing harm, our, like you just said in that example, our patterns are alive, you know? And so I had like a really intense conversation this morning where I got to be present to someone I love very, very deeply, sharing with me how I caused them harm. And it was way beyond what I was aware had happened in their experience. Like it was way more harm that they experienced than I was aware of until this morning. And I
oh,
had the time and the presence to like really sit and really hold space while they cried and shared their experience of how I did literally like layer after layer after layer of things I did or things I said that was like a cascading domino effect of like pretty significant harm. And this is emotional, psychological. And yes, I can validate their story with empathy. I spent, most of the conversation listening and acknowledging that I totally understand why they felt that way. And I am so, so sorry for what I did and for the impact it left them with. And I had, zero intention of any of that massively harmful impact, right?
Yeah,
And I
totally.
could see how, of course, like they're like I know them well, their traumas and their patterns. Like I can see how their storyline, how I'm a part of their storyline. And I can hold space from like a bigger perspective, right? And this gets more into that sort of spiritual soul lens. It's like I can be an instrument, and this is potentially very controversial, but I can be an instrument that supports someone to be triggered, feel harm so that and I can be the instrument of a loving enough container and a safe enough container where they can have both the experience of being hurt and the experience of being listened to and being cared for in the process of healing that harm.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that started to happen this morning. There's more repair work to do and there's more listening to do, but it's like like the I just felt so humble and so like actual pain in my heart for
Mm-hmm.
what experience I left them with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it wasn't in a way, and this takes like training, right? And development to get to here, but it wasn't in a way where I was in like a shame spiral and, I'm so bad or I really fucked up. It's like, I didn't have any of these intentions for it to leave them how it left them, but it left them how it left them. And that sucks. And I'm so sorry. And, we're not even at the stage of the conversation where it's like, okay, are you ready to hear my perspective? And can we hold both of these truths? That is part of the arc of the
Yeah.
art of the
Yeah.
pair. And like, we'll probably get there. This person and I both have like really high level communication skills and conflict resolution skills. But the first part, it was just me really getting the impact of how I left them and how it like actually hurt me in my heart to know that that was how they were left from things I said and things I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, just taking a breath and just being here with you as a human in this moment and giving thanks to your willingness to come on today and be generous enough to share and own the impacts that your actions had, even in the face of you, of course, never intending them to. Um, and so I'm just impressed and grateful that you're here letting us in. Um, and I'm just curious, what's it like to get to share that right now, or what's coming up in you?
Thanks. Thank you for your sweet acknowledgement. Well, where it takes me is actually, I want to ask you a question. So it's going to be kind of a continuation of this piece.
Yeah,
I imagine you, like me, correct me if I'm wrong, have done a lot of your like adult relating where you have maybe more communication skills or conflict resolution skills or emotional intelligence or self responsibility or presence and awareness, like all these things, more often than not, I've had sort of the higher level of training and ability in those areas than a lot of the people I'm in, different forms of relationships with in my life. And we could say anything from, family
sure.
to work to romance, right?
Yeah.
And so my experience is people like us that have more training and more self-awareness are often holding more space for the other person's pain and process. And part of my challenge in my past is feeling like it hasn't often come around to the place where they actually have the ability and the capacity to really listen to my experience that was happening sort of simultaneously on parallel tracks. So it's kind of like a one-way repair process. Do you have
Hmm.
a lot of that in your past? And hopefully not in the present relationships, but like more in the past?
Yeah, yes, that has definitely been my experience. And I think I'm getting better at that level of what I would call it is discernment of capacity. And so my assessing and discerning one's capacity to be able to have that reciprocal meeting and that reciprocal holding. And it's almost like when I have relationships that I can choose how close they are, when I can choose their positionality and how close they are in my life. Like, so for example, I can choose who my friends are. I can choose who my partner is. I can't necessarily always choose maybe who I share, a house with, or like the fact that my dad is my dad and will forever be my dad. And like, but I have choice on like where I put them in my sphere of closeness. And so when I see someone that can't meet me in that reciprocity, I could passively or directly let that person know, like, I'm going to choose to actually keep you more at a distance to love both of us better. Um, and I felt exhausted in the past because I didn't have better discernment of capacity.
Yeah.
And um and then I get to, and I've had these experiences living in communities where it's like I am choosing to live in community, and it just so happens that this other person doesn't have a lot of capacity. And so it's like how to find the things that I trust and enjoy about this person, but how do I create as much safe a space that for myself with love to create as much harmony as possible. Because
Mhm.
if I don't trust someone's capacity to navigate hard conversations or meet me in holding space, I'm I am with honor and respect, I have more boundaries. And
Yes.
that has been a slow learning process for me. Am I getting
Yeah.
you correctly?
Yeah, yeah. It goes back to, I think, video one, where I told you the first time I was doing the Art of Repair course online, you gave this tidbit that landed really impactfully for me about essentially to connect what you're saying. If someone doesn't, if I perceive someone doesn't have the capacity to do a holistic repair conversation, I can choose to opt out. I don't have to enter into that conversation with them. So it's
Yeah.
like the discernment of someone's capacity is totally related to this. And can I give an example from my life that I think is a really easy uh, sort of
Example.
factual pattern to understand? And
Totally.
probably most people will relate to being on one side or the other of this, or potentially having had been on both sides. So in a relationship where, you know, and for me, it's happened in multiple romantic relationships where my partner experiences that I've caused them harm and they turn away from communication. So they withdraw. They say, like, I need space, or they, cut me out. I've had people cut me out and have no desire, no ability, no presence to do a healing process, to do a repair process. And what is very challenging for me, and I think this is kind of like Art of Repair 303, is like it's the secondary harm. Okay. So the person who's initially saying, you hurt me, I'm hurt, there's a lot of focus on them. There's a lot of focus on their nervous system. There's a lot of focus on repairing that harm. And, I've got to take responsibility and apologize. And all that's true and all that's important. But are we looking at the secondary, the person who's the harm doer and all the harm they're experiencing by, like, I feel harm when someone I love cuts me out of their life without the opportunity to repair it.
Uh-huh.
I feel harm when someone's like, I'm taking, and they're entitled to that. They're entitled to say, I don't want any communication. But like it actually hurts me. And then
Uh-huh.
there's nobody there to do that repair work with, my secondary harm. And yeah.
Okay, so that's one aspect of the secondary harm, but I just thought of another secondary harm, which is, okay, I hurt someone innocently, unintentionally, unknowingly, or whatever, and they want to have a repair process, and they come at me, and they're coming at me of how much I've caused them harm, and
Mhm.
I'm listening and holding space for them, and then once they feel fully heard and understood, and then at that moment, if they don't have the willingness or the capacity to also hear and understand my experience, then I'm left with the secondary harm of I don't feel seen and understood and cared for, and I'm holding space for the other person. So that's
Right.
also another place I could see secondary harm happening.
And it seems very similar to me. It's really a different version of the same thing, right? Like we're talking about the same pattern. Like the other
Yeah,
person's not there to
yeah,
support the second half of the process. And unfortunately, I feel like
right.
I've been in that a lot of times in my life, and it's been hard. And I can even use this example from, my professional life where I'm supporting someone who we'll call the harm doer going through an accountability process because they've demonstrated, a pattern of harming multiple people and there's
Yeah.
multiple people calling for them to be held to account. And in this process, so much of the focus is on harm doer repairing harm with person A, B, C, D, E, F. And harm doer is actually experiencing all kinds of harm in themselves going through this process. And sometimes it's like the public accountability process causes harm to someone's reputation, to someone's income, to someone's livelihood. Like,
Mm.
and if we tend to that, sometimes people think we're, anti-victim, right? And I, at this stage, understand the complexity. I think there's more often than not harm on both. If for any conflict, I think more often than not, there's harm on both sides. And there is repair work on both sides. And I guess this is, our work in the world is to really try to support people to get to the place where we can do the full integrated healing, which is usually tending to two different people's nervous systems, because conflict really isn't one way. It's like both nervous systems are disrupted and impacted by the time conflict is happening.
That was quotable. AI, make that a quote.
Put that in book.
Okay. Oh my gosh. We have I have a call in 3 minutes, so I do need to get off.
All right, we're
And
gonna wrap.
I feel like this is we just scratched the surface. I feel like we just started and I'm
Yeah.
like so hungry for more of this. This was so fun.
I love it. You love it like I love it. Stay tuned, y'all. We're gonna make more videos on this. We're just
More
getting started.
repair nerds. Hey.
Hey. All
Okay.
right.
Hmm. Well, if you are still here and still listening, and it is still not past January 19th, 2026, we are teaching at the Esalen Institute a 5-day retreat, January 19th to the 23rd. If you want to come geek out with us on the art of repair so that you can experience more ease, more harmony, more connections with the people that matter the most to you.
Yeah. January 19th to the 23rd. Esalen, California is near Big Sur. It's beautiful. There's going to be some natural hot springs we're going to be soaking in, and we're going to get some forward movement in actually repairing relationships in your life. And everybody
Yes.
benefits from this.
And
Everybody.
it's going to be super, super serious
Mm, very boring.
and lots of fun.
You. Until next time.
Okay. Okay.